In this special episode, Doug chats with Michael Goldsmith from Ohio, who shares the emotional journey behind his UK trip, inspired by a deep family connection to the Titanic. From crossing the Atlantic on the Queen Mary 2 to reconnecting with long-lost relatives and navigating the UK by rail, Michael's story is full of meaning, history and thoughtful planning.
Welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is the founder of the UK travel planning website, Tracy Collins. In this podcast, Tracy shares destination guides, travel tips, and itinerary ideas, as well as interviews with a variety of guests who share their knowledge and experience of UK travel to help you plan your perfect UK vacation. Join us as we explore the UK from cosmopolitan cities to quaint villages, from historic castles to beautiful islands, and from the picturesque countryside to seaside towns.
Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the UK Travel Planning Podcast. Today I'm handing over the reins to Doug, who's chatting with Michael Goldsmith from Ohio. But first, a quick thank you to one of our podcast supporters, Tina Lou Lang, for her ongoing support of the show. Thank you so much, Tina. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us keep it running each week, you can do so from as little as $3 a month. Just check in with the link in the show notes and we truly appreciate you, and you could get a shout out in a forthcoming episode. Now, anyway, hello, Doug. You're here for this episode.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
So now, Michael recently returned from an unforgettable trip to the UK, and it wasn't just any holiday. This journey was inspired by his powerful family connection to the Titanic. So he and his wife started with a transatlantic crossing on the Queen Mary 2 and went on to explore places like Southampton, Rochester, London, Inverness, and Belfast. So in this episode, you'll hear how Michael used our ebook, podcast, and a one-to-one itinerary consultation with Doug to help plan a meaningful and memorable UK trip filled with personal discoveries, surprise moments, and a few unexpected challenges that he handled like a pro. So let's get started. Over to you, Doug.
Welcome, Michael. Can you start by introducing yourself, where you're from, and a bit about who you travelled with?
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm from Ohio in the USA, and I took my wife to the UK.
So your trip has such a meaningful story behind it. Can you tell us a bit more about your family connection with the famous Titanic and how that influenced your travel plans?
Well, my grandfather and his family boarded Titanic at Southampton. Originally, they were from Kent, a little town called Strood, just across the Medway from Rochester. So about 50 years ago, I came up with the idea to take and visit the UK by ship and trace my family and the Titanic to their origins. And so we started our trip on Queen Mary 2, and we landed at Southampton, and we went from there.
Wow, that's certainly a long time in making. What made 2025 the right time to go?
Well, last year I found out that the Queen Mary 2 is the only ocean liner that is still making the crossing across the Atlantic. And researching that, I found out she is 20 years into her service life. My wife and I are in our late 50s, and we're healthy enough to do a lot of walking. So I just thought the time is now if we're going to go by ship. And so I booked passage, as you know. In the process of paying that off is when I discovered your podcast and set up the consult with you and Tracy and did all the research as far as where we wanted to go, how we were going to get there. And again, utilizing your ebook for rail travel, I planned to discover and utilize all the different forms of transportation: ship, rail, coach service called the hand coach, and then, of course, flying home.
So literally, I suppose you could say, use an English expression, all your ducks were in a row. So for 2025, everything just sort of came together. You saw this, you saw that, you had this plan, you did that, and it just literally came together and just seemed right for 2025 to be the time to go. And I'm glad you mentioned that about your health as well, because that's an important factor, because these types of trips can be pretty tiring and pretty draining, can't they?
Yes, they can. We were lucky. We didn't over-plan anything. We planned travel time, which came in handy, and I'll tell you about that later. But we planned days of travel. We played relaxed time. We did do 2 tours that we planned. My friend in Belfast had plans of her own, and I'll tell you about that as well.
That's really good. So, yeah, you mentioned the itinerary console, which we both thoroughly enjoyed as well, because you and I hit it off first time we met, didn't we, really? And we were in contact quite often as well, which again, I will mention that later as well. But what were you hoping to actually achieve from the consult, and did you achieve that?
Number one, I wanted advice on rail travel because I know you worked for the rail service for many years. So gaining insight on a one-on-one basis was a need that I can't get from an ebook or from just doing research, because questions might come up such as ease of travel, how to plan in case something goes wrong, which did happen. I pretty much had our itinerary kind of set, but I didn't have the expertise to overcome any obstacles.
So it's just a question of tweaking what you had in place, and really it's a good advert for needing the personal touch. So with electronic devices and electronic information, and I'm going down the AI route here, you're proving the point that the personal touch is still needed and there's still a place for it out there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a firm believer in personal touch, as you've seen since our consult. Keeping not only that personal touch going, but letting you know how it was going as we went through our trip, so that you could see the results of your efforts, not only in the ebook, but consultation and your podcast.
Oh, thank you for that. What were the key things you found most confusing or challenging when it came to UK rail travel before the consult? If you can just remember exactly the details on that, because it's a while ago since we actually did the consult.
Well, for me, being that I had spent time in Berlin for 3 years, the rail travel came kind of easy. I didn't know which route to take that would be best to suit my need. And that's where the consult came in handy, because you gave me three different choices, backup plan. I'm a firm believer in having a backup plan, and you helped with that as well. You mentioned getting a two together rail card. And for us, we weren't constantly on the move, but we had planned travel dates. And with the two together rail card, it allowed us to get a lower fee and gave us time to where we weren't rushing in the morning to go catch a train before rush hour. And we didn't really have fight crowds. The one time we did have to use a tube for one stop, and even the console and your rail guide helped with that, because you told me what apps I needed to put on my phone and what to expect really, and it just fell into place. You know, even when a bump happened, it was like, okay, I knew where to go. And it turns out that, as we'll see later, I actually helped another American couple.
That's good to know. I mean, that's life. You learn something and you pass that knowledge on. So I'm all in favour of that one. So on to the next question. Let's talk about your destinations, your routes now. So you arrived by sea aboard the Queen Mary 2. What was that experience like?
Well, given my family history with transatlantic travel, it was very, very, very emotional for me. And as well, my wife, too. When we first saw the ship and we boarded in Brooklyn, it was just indescribable, the feeling that we're going through. I actually took pictures of my family that were on Titanic, and I had them set up on my desk in my room. I don't know if I showed you that picture or not. If I didn't, I'll send it to you. So it was like they were traveling with me. And the funny part is, I think I slept through when we were near the Titanic site. We passed about 102 miles north of it, I was told, but I never saw it come up on the screen. I guess I was sleeping during that time period. But emotionally, it was like the circle had been completed. And then we arrived in Southampton and we went to Stonehenge, Salisbury, passed through London to go to Rochester, and then back to London to Inverness and Belfast before flying home from Dublin.
Yeah, so that's really good. So you say Southampton, Stonehenge, Salisbury. Just a quick overview, your experiences of those places. Did you enjoy? I mean, Southampton was obviously the starting point, but you got a friend there as well, which makes it nice and welcoming when you get off the boat as well. So the Stonehenge and Salisbury, just a quick overview of those.
Well, my friends picked us up at our hotel in Southampton. The first day they showed us around Southampton to all the Titanic sites and the Mayflower site. There's more of the Mayflower in Southampton as well. Then the next day we checked out of our hotel and they took us to Salisbury to the New Forest. My friend's husband was a taxi driver, so he knows all the back ways, ins and outs of how to get there. So we had an enjoyable drive through the New Forest, saw cottages with thatch roofs and so forth. Stonehenge was very busy, but the way we went kind of the back roads, so we encountered very little traffic on our ways, and it was very impressive. because when you first get to Stonehenge, the main building there, and it's like a little museum that tells you the history, the known history of the site. And then you go through that and you go outside to a mock up of what a village would look like back then. And if you want, you can try and move the stone the way they think they moved the stones back then. Then you get on a bus that takes you about a mile up the hill to the Stonehenge site. As you look out across the plains around it, you can see the burial mounds of the people that probably built the site. So you just see small humps, and they're actually burial mounds. And then from there, we went to Salisbury Cathedral. I wanted to see the Magna Carta. Now, inside the cathedral, you've got a reflective pool right as you look at the altar down the main part of the hallway. And so I ducked down and I got pictures of the blue stained glass behind the altar, looking off that pool, that little pool. It looks like a table, but it's actually a fountain. But that was very cool.
Very nice. Well, thank you for sharing that.
We spent 2 nights in Rochester, and so I visited Rochester Castle. I have a postcard that my grandfather gave me, and I'll send you a picture of it. And I got updated photos. The picture on the postcard was taken about 1920 or so, and then I have an updated photos of our visit. And I took some in the evening when the sun was hitting it just right, and I went back in the morning. And the morning one is a colored photo, but it looks black and white because of the shadow, the sun coming from the opposite direction. And while we were there, we met cousins of mine from my great grandfather's side of the family. It was supposed to be one. We were just going to have a pint, but 3 generations showed up, so we all had pints. And then later that evening, we went to see the home where my grandfather lived, and I was able to see that because there's a picture of my family that I thought was taken out from the street view, but it was actually taken in the back garden, and we discovered that when we visited the street and the house. And I actually spoke to the neighbors who knew my family story because her daughter had lived there and had researched it. And I said, "Yeah, I'm the grandson." So that was very interesting. And we got pictures of the street, and then we went and had another pint with my cousins at a working man's club, and that was a hospital where my grandfather was probably born at the time.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, you made special memories, meeting up with the family down in Rochester. That's just such a personal story there. And I thank you for sharing. It must have been great and really emotional to meet all the family with the connection to Rochester as well. I can only imagine how that was.
Planning a trip to London, if you're looking for tours that are well organised, full of interesting stories and a pleasure to take part in, I can't recommend Walks and Devour tours enough. I've done several myself, from famous landmarks to amazing food tours, and every single one has been a real highlight. Their guides are great storytellers who make the city feel alive. The team really cares about the details and puts a lot of thought into making each experience feel special, comfortable, and full of those "I'm so glad I did this" moments. You can find all my favourite tours at uktravelplanning.com/best London tours.
We left Rochester and went up to London, and we took a Discover Real London cab tour. We had Mark. Ollie was great during the process. Mark was fantastic. He showed us a lot of Titanic stuff. Like, we went in the Fitzroy Hotel, and Fitzroy Dole did the architecture of the hotel. His designs were on Titanic and Olympic and their sister Britannia. There's a dragon in that hotel, and his name is Lucky George. Unlucky George is still down with Titanic. That's why he's unlucky, and Lucky George is in the hotel. So that was a surprise. I didn't even know anything about that hotel, but that's where Fitzroy Dole is where the expression "all doled up" comes from, because he was very fancy in his designs. So next time you go to London, look up Fitzroy Hotel. It's a very, very posh hotel. But we were allowed access to certain areas. He also showed us where the Churchill war rooms are. He showed us where the courts are. He showed us a Roman wall, one of the original portions of the Roman wall that surrounded London when it was under Roman control. And then that night we hopped on the Caledonia Sleeper. We only made it to Birmingham because there was a storm had come through and lines were down, and my wife woke me up and said, "We're stopped." And I'm like, "Okay, it's probably for a freight train." And I went back to sleep, and I woke up and I looked at my phone. We're back in London, and I was like, "What?" And something garbled came over the loudspeaker, so I went and found a crew member, and she said, "Yeah, we had to come back to London, but we have transportation for you to go to Inverness on a train over King's Cross." I think we were supposed to be getting on a Glen Mhor train, but we ended up on a Zumo train that was leaving just as we got there. The funny part is, I mentioned an American couple that I helped. I had navigated not just my wife and I, but that American couple that we met on the train. We actually had drinks with them the night before on a Caledonian Sleeper. But I got all four of us to the train. The wife from the couple that we met found a train going to Inverness, so we all hopped on that. It was a Lumo train. So we missed maybe 6 hours of time in Inverness, but we got there in plenty of time because that was a travel day. We did not plan anything that day. We had a tour planned for the next day.
So just backtrack, it's like all those places you've got to visit on your next excursion to the UK, or Newcastle and York and Alnwick. In London as well. Discover Real London is really good, and anybody listening who wants information on that, the details are on our website and they will be in the show notes as well. So yes, I know about the Caledonian sleep experience you had because we were in contact during that time. The storm that came in, it's Bordeaux Head line down, a tree fell onto the line, so that took quite a while to get it sorted as well. So you found out how quickly it is to walk up the Euston Road to King's Cross, and the Azuma service is run by LNER. It's one of their flagship services. So but it proves your flexibility though, Michael. You know, you went with it, you had the apps that we suggested, and you knew exactly how to modify your plans. But, you know, I'm sure this reflects you as a person, is the fact that, you know, you didn't panic, you just went with the flow, you looked at all our resources, you had the consult, so we give you some sort of information as to what to do as a backup. As you say, you do like a backup plan as well. That's the military side of you, I'm sure. So it's quite an experience. So you find your way into Scotland and all the way up into Inverness. So tell me about Inverness.
We stayed in Inverness. Okay, we stayed at Glen Mhor. It's a property that's on the other side of the river from the train station, up the street from I think it's the Inverness Cathedral. It's in a quiet neighborhood. It's 2 minutes from the guest house down to where we were meeting our tour the next day. And we met the tour. We did a tour around Loch Ness to include Fort Castle, a boat ride on the loch. It was kind of a tour, but it wasn't a tour. It was more like just give me a ride up the loch. But that was great. The weather was a little chillier and a little wetter than what we thought, but we got to see some amazing things. We got to see a waterfall that you had to hike into and hike out back. I have a picture of the sign. I can't remember the name of it. But then, like I said, we went to York Court Castle. We met Stephen the Nessie hunter. He's got a little place right on the beach. So we bought a souvenir from him, and then we went to Loch Ness, to the Nessie Museum, or whatever they call it. We had lunch there at a restaurant right next to it, and then toured that, and then got back on the bus. And the Rebby's tour was neat because there was only 16 people on the bus, and it was basically an all-day excursion. You got back about 5 o'clock, and we went to Joe Fox's, and then the next day was a travel day. We traveled down to Glasgow and spent the night. And then the next day we caught the Hendon coach from Belfast.
And finally, your journey ended in Northern Ireland. So how did you find travelling to Belfast? And then tell me about, you know, what you got up to there, considering all of your planning. It must have been quite a moment to arrive.
Well, we left Glasgow on the Hendon coach. I wanted to get the morning run, but I couldn't. So we left at noon, which put us a little late getting to Belfast, but plenty of time because I just let the hotel know ahead of time that I need to change my dinner reservation. So we got on the Hendon coach and took us onto the ferry. And as we were crossing the Irish Sea, getting ready to go into Belfast Low, I got a picture of a whale from the ferry. So that was awesome. Just one single whale just happened to come up fairly close to the the ferry, and I just happened to be out there with my camera, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can get it. And sure enough, I did get it. Then we landed port in Belfast, and emotionally, I knew that those were the waters that the Titanic had her sea trailed on, and that she had gone in and out of Belfast Low before arriving in Southampton. So I was excited, and it was very emotional because you had been there and you had shared some things that were on my itinerary, such as the Belfast Memorial Gardens at City Hall. But the short version is we stayed at the Titanic Hotel in Belfast, which was our utmost headquarters, and that is where Titanic was designed. Unfortunately, they put us in one of the new rooms, so we didn't get to stay in the building, the original building itself. But where we stayed overlooks where Titanic was built. The slipways are there, but they're outlined in light, so they light up at night. And then right there as well as Titanic, the Titanic attraction. People tend to call it a museum, but it's really just an attraction to tell you a little bit about the history of Belfast as far as the industries that were there and shipbuilding and Titanic. So it's not really solely based on Titanic, but it is based on Belfast as a whole. The people that work the shipyards, the people that work the textile mills, the whiskey making and so forth. So all that is included in that history. It's like a small history of Belfast. But I have a friend in Belfast as well, and she set up an itinerary the next day that she kept secret from me. And it turns out that she took us to the city hall, and we toured the Memorial Gardens outside there. We found my great grandfather's name on the memorial, as you did. And then the surprise was he was a high sheriff of Belfast, and a personal tour of the council chambers upstairs that the tourists don't get to see on their tours. So we got to see the high sheriff's private little bathroom sort of toilet, and it is set up the way a first class room would have been on the Titanic. Same woodwork, everything, same pattern and carpet, very beautiful. We got some photos in there, and then the high sheriff was telling us the history and a little bit of this and that, just chit-chatting along the way. I was able to share my family's story and my family's connection to Titanic with her. Her name is Fiona. She's very, very nice. And then following that, there was a tour guide that was dedicated to my wife and I and my friend who was there with us. And then later that day, we had a personal tour of the Titanic attraction. It was already set up for me. And we were able to go down into the dry dock and stand there and say, wow, you could tell how long Titanic was once you were in there. And I have pictures from that too. Our last night in Belfast, we stayed in Travelodge, and then the next day was another travel day. And that's where the second hump happened. On my phone, we had tickets for a bus service from Belfast to Dublin to catch our flight. But it kept taking me to the new bus station. So I ended up scratching off that and buying a ticket for a TransLink bus. And we made Dublin and flew home, no problem.
So overall, looking at the trip now, sort of tips and reflections sort of section, if you like. What was it like travelling across the UK? Any surprises other than the fact that you've mentioned? Anything good or bad?
It was very, very easy. And I think that's purely through research and my own experiences in the past. Because I lived in Washington, D.C. for 4.5 years. I lived in Berlin for 3 years. It felt like home, really, more than you would think. Because not that my wife knew I had been there, but we both felt like home. And it was, I really don't think I had a bad experience. I mean, everything was, even the Caledonian Sleeper, they refunded our entire fare almost right away, 45 minutes at the most. And they made sure we were good to go all the way where we were going. So that's all good. As far as the experience, I don't think there was anything bad about it. I really don't. We got to see a lot. We didn't get to see everything we wanted. Like she wanted to see the Kelpies, and like you mentioned, I wanted to see in the wood from the RMS Olympic. We were generally surprised by our time with Mark in London, the 4 hours that we were able to spend with Mark. We got to see Lord Nelson's statuary at Trafalgar Square. We got to see what used to be the White Star offices at Oceanic House. I don't think we had a bad experience. I really don't. Anyone we encountered were more than happy to help us if we need help.
Okay. That's really good to hear. I know you and I are in contact quite often, particularly around the Caledonian Sleeper experience there. And honestly, I think I said this to you more than once. I felt at times I was there with you. I know you kept your own records as well, as like a diary as you were going through. But looking back on your trip, is there any one specific sort of meaningful or memorable moment on your journey?
Well, there were several. The most memorable, I guess, would be meeting distant relatives I didn't know I had in the camp. One of the first memorable moments was when we left New York by ship. We met a lovely couple named Amy and Jeff on the ship, and we ended up spending a lot of time with them at different points during our 7 days at sea. I was able to let them know, hey, when we leave New York, we go right underneath the Verrazano Bridge, and there's very low clearance. So we got to share that with them. But I knew that through research. So the next memorable thing would be meeting friends in Southampton and being shown around, very personal. Meeting my family in Rochester, that held a deep meaning that is different than, say, meeting friends. And then, as you noted, being honored at a VIP in Belfast. Those are the most special memories that anyone could ever ask for.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, Michael. So is there anything you do differently if you're planning a similar trip or your next trip?
Hopefully have more time for the different places. That would be very different. Like we're planning on going back in a couple of years, but we're going to be more selective. Like we want to spend more time in Rochester, where we met my family, because my wife absolutely loves that town. That Rochester is also where Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, and he has a Swiss chalet there that I hope to see refurbished. So my wife, Rochester, Belfast as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. So that sort of wraps up all the questions. And thank you so much for sharing all your personal experiences there. One final question. What is your one tip for someone visiting the UK for the first time?
Research. Top of the line research. The second, along with that, I would say get a consult with you and Tracy, because then you have personal experience to say, hey, maybe you should do it this way instead of doing it that way. It'll be easier on you. That's top two tips I could ever give.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael, for being on this episode of our podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. It's been a pleasure to be in touch with you throughout your trip, and it's been a pleasure to do a podcast with you. So thank you very much.
I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much to Michael for joining me and sharing his incredible journey, from honouring his Titanic family legacy to navigating the UK with confidence and even helping fellow travellers along the way. It's been a real pleasure to hear how meaningful this trip was. If you'd like to plan your own UK adventure like Michael, don't forget to check the show notes at uktravelplanning.com/episode 164 for links to our UK train travel ebook and details about our itinerary consultations. Thanks for listening, and for me and Tracy,
happy UK travel planning. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the UK Travel Planning Podcast. As always, show notes can be found at uktravelplanning.com. If you've enjoyed the show, why not leave us feedback via text or a review on your favourite podcast app? We love to hear from you, and you never know, you may receive a shout out in a future episode. But as always, that just leaves me to say, until next week, happy UK travel planning.